If you're watching this video, then the chances are you've experienced a relationship breakup at some point. Now, whether you're the instigator or on the receiving end of it, the reasons given as to why the relationship failed were more than likely not 100% accurate. That's no one's fault. When you're going through a breakup, it's a very emotional time, and these emotions can really cloud our judgment and our understanding of the feelings that we're going through. Normally, the person who's ending the relationship is aware they're causing a lot of pain to the other person. They don't want to make it any worse. So they sometimes tiptoe around the truth. But I'm here to tell you the exact reason as to why those relationships failed. I've got over 25 years of experience of dating and relationships, and you learn a lot from those failures. So I'm going to break down for you in the cold light of day exactly why those relationships ended. Now, before we go any further, please click the like and subscribe button, and that'll encourage me to make more videos like this. And you'll also be alerted of further videos I make on this topic. The idea is I want to use my experiences and my knowledge to help guide you through your breakups and guide you through the situations you face in your life so that they're less likely to happen in the future. The main reason that all relationships fail is as a result in a drop in emotional or physical attraction, or more than likely a combination of the two. You see, the two are inextricably linked. If your physical attraction drops, so does your emotional attraction, and likewise. But how does this happen, I hear you ask? Well, now I'm going to go through both of those in a bit more detail, because there tend to be a lot of factors that build up over time and compound to get to that point where the person eventually checks out of the relationship. Please stay tuned as well, because at the end of this video, I'm going to give a bonus section on the ick. You often hear people talk about the ick in today's dating environment, but a lot of people don't really know how to explain what it is. I can tell you exactly what it is, and I'll give you my own little personal anecdote as to when I experienced the ick. I've experienced it a few times, but this one in particular might make you laugh. So stay tuned for that. So the first thing I'm going to go through is a drop in physical attraction. What can cause it? The most obvious one is if there's a significant change in your partner's physical appearance. So whether that be they've gained significant weight, maybe they've lost a lot of weight, or maybe they've just stopped caring for themselves, whether that be their personal hygiene, their health, or their fitness. You see this a lot. Couples get together and they just seem to stop caring about themselves or each other. I never understand this, because when they're out dating, they're going to the gym, they're eating well, they make themselves as attractive as possible, and then they get with someone, they think, job done, and they just sign off. See, the way I view this is, you get with someone, you've got to work harder, because you've got to try and keep that person. And relationships, successful relationships, involve work. So you just got to keep going. But if you get with someone and they just stop working on themselves, that shows a real lack of respect and discipline, and that means you can lose respect for them as well. And as a result of that, you can lose attraction. Now, remember, it's not as superficial as waking up one morning and saying, I no longer find them attractive because they've put a few pounds on. You know, we all change over time, but this is a noticeable difference in the person that you met to the person that you're with now. And remember, it's normally combined with some other things that are going on, which I'll probably touch on when I go through the emotional attraction next. The second thing on the list that can have an extremely detrimental impact on your physical attraction for your partner is a sexual incompatibility. Let's just say that you have totally different sex drives. The one person has a high sex drive. They might seem too demanding for the other person, but the other person just wants to have sex when they feel like it and when the other person feels like it, which is a more natural way of it being in a relationship. It should be spontaneous. It should be based on that natural chemistry between the two of you. But if one person is saying, we need to be having sex tonight, we need to be having sex 5 times a week on these nights, then it becomes monotonous, it becomes robotic, and it becomes boring. And that creates an extreme lack of attraction for the person on the receiving end of it. They no longer see this partner as someone they desire intimately. They just become an object demanding physical interaction, almost mechanical, and it can create a huge drop in physical attraction. Now, the next thing on the list is linked to that sexual aspect of a relationship, and that is if someone indulges too much in porn. Now, I think porn's a really unhealthy habit. It should only be used in like an emergency scenario where you just need to offload, for want of a better word. But if someone is indulging in this fantasy world all the time, that can place unrealistic expectations on their partner. And if they expect their partner to look and behave the same way as this artificial world, then they're going to be disappointed in the bedroom. And that's a really unfair expectation to put on your partner. And your partner will not only feel disappointed, and they'll feel almost detached from that situation. You might suffer physically as well. You might have some level of performance anxiety because the things that you're getting used to turning you on in that artificial world don't exist in the real world, and the two just don't translate. So fair enough, sometimes couples watch porn together if they're watching their fantasies and then acting them out on each other. I can understand how that works, but if it's one person has an unhealthy porn habit, then it can really eat away at that relationship in a negative way. So just stay away from the porn. That's my advice. Seek the real thing. Seek to make the real thing even better than it already is. Talk about your fantasies together and work on them together. That's the key to success, if you ask me. Next thing on my list is past experiences. Sometimes your partner might do things that remind you of a previous partner that obviously the relationship didn't work out with. You can then pin those negative feelings and emotions on your current partner. Once again, this is really unfair, and it sounds like, Dan, these things, it's just not right. I haven't done anything wrong. No, you haven't done anything wrong. But I'm just telling you what can happen. You'd like to think that the person who experiences this can discriminate between the fact that, hold on, although they've done the same thing to my ex, they're not my ex. Let's compartmentalize that and let's move forward with this person and accept that, everybody does things differently. But it can happen where something that's gone on in a previous relationship that was very toxic is triggered in your current relationship. And sometimes that trigger can be just enough to push you over the edge. And remember, it's never just the one thing. It tends to be as a result of multiple things that I'm going through on this list. So don't think that just because I'm talking about them in isolation, when they happen in isolation, that means it's it, because you'll be thinking, well, oh my God, how can I possibly make a mistake or be slightly imperfect in relationships without them failing? I'm not saying that. It tends to be a lot of things all grouped together that means someone gets to the point where they no longer want to be with you. Next on the list that causes a drop in that physical attraction is over familiarity. Now, you know the term familiarity breeds contempt. I strongly believe in that because you see some couples and they just live in each other's pockets. I don't know how people do that for a start, because I think it's healthy to have your own interests, but then meet in the middle and have shared pursuits. But if you are always doing things together, then how can you have time apart to miss each other? And that's really healthy to have, because your feelings tend to grow when you're apart. Say if your partner goes away for a weekend with their friends and you're at home, then when you come back together after that weekend, when you haven't too much contact, you can talk about the stuff you've been up to, and you look forward to seeing them on that Sunday night when they get back. It makes a lot of other things in the relationship much more exciting. It creates that attraction dynamic. But if you're constantly together, everywhere you go is together, then how are you going to have any different things to talk about? I see people sometimes, they're speaking to their girlfriend or boyfriend throughout the day. It's like, well, what are you going to talk about when you get home? They don't realize that over time, they're just eating away at that dynamic they need to be drawn to one another. You see, when you spend time apart, you want to spend time together. And that's a really healthy aspect of a relationship. On the flip side of that, too much distance from one another can also cause a drop in that physical attraction, because if you have too much time apart, you just don't get the chance to reforge that physical bond that you make between you. So simple things like kissing, hugging, obviously having sex, and just that eye contact, that creates chemicals within our body like oxytocin. They're like the bonding chemicals. And if you're not getting those on a regular basis, then you start to lose some level of attraction for that person. That's why long distance relationships are so stressful for a lot of people. It's not something I would like to do. I've experienced it, and you don't really want to be apart from each other for more than like 3 weeks, because then you just think, what's the point? We're not even seeing each other. And relationships are about having that connection with one another. Some people can do it. Some people who aren't so concerned with the physical interaction are quite happy with having an online relationship or a phone call, but it doesn't work for a lot of people, because that's not how we evolved. If a man and a woman didn't originally make that physical connection, we wouldn't still be here today. So if you have too much time apart, or it's a long distance relationship, that will have an impact both emotionally and physically. And that leads us on nicely onto the things that can cause a drop in emotional attraction. The first thing I've got on the list is day-to-day disagreements, where there is a lack of compromise. Let's say, for example, someone's always trying to win arguments instead of seeking understanding. And as my dad often says, who's been married for 50 years, you've got to play for a draw. It's not a competition between the two of you, because if someone is always trying to be the winner, then that's going to create a negative environment. That negative environment festers, and that just puts a big divide between the two of you and breaks down that emotional connection that you have. The second thing on the list is a lot more obvious than that. And that is if someone shows acts of cruelty, evil, or selfishness, because we're attracted to kind and compassionate people. No one wants to be with a nasty person. So the minute you see something like that, it can be an instant turn off. Say, for example, someone's just been cruel. Well, say just, it's one of the worst things you can imagine in my eyes. If someone's just being cruel to their pet, it's disgusting. It would just be an instant end of the relationship for me, because if someone's capable of doing something like that, I see that as having traces of evil in their soul. You know, I don't know, that sounds quite drastic, but it is. Like, why would you want to hurt an innocent creature? And then people who are rude to members of the public or people they don't know. You know, I've heard of people saying they've gone out on dates and their partners tried to impress them by talking down to the waiter or waitress. I find that behaviour disgusting. We're all the same. We're all on the same level playing field. You got to treat each other with the same level of respect. So things like that can be an instant buzzkill for a relationship. Next thing I've got on the list is suppression of self. If you're with someone that doesn't allow you to be who you truly are, then you're going to have so much resentment towards them. Eventually, you're going to pull the plug on it. Let's say, for example, you're a social person. You like going out and chatting to other people. That makes you feel alive. You love that interaction. You love that energy, but your partner doesn't like that. Then, you know, whenever you're in that environment, you almost feel like you can't be yourself because your partner's scowling at you or frowning at you. It has a huge impact. And if you can't be who you want to be, it's going to end. It's not going to last. It can't work, because you're supposed to be supporting each other and allowing each other to grow into your authentic selves. That's a big part of my therapy. Find out who you are and embrace who you are. We've all got our own faults, but we've also got our own rare collection of strengths, and that's what makes you unique as an individual, and that's your superpower, your authenticity. So if someone tries to take that away from you, they're not the person for you. Sarcastic digs about real issues. Now, sarcasm is the lowest form of wit. And when people have sarcastic digs, they're effectively trying to wrap humour around a serious issue that they don't want to acknowledge. So they almost do it slyly. And you feel that. When someone has a sarcastic dig, you might not be able to see straight through it, but it makes you feel a bit like, oh, why are they making me feel bad for doing that? I've not done anything wrong. And over time, remember what I said, it just keeps building up. The next thing on the list is a lack of polarity between the masculine and feminine. Now, I'm not just referring to a heterosexual relationship here. Even in a homosexual relationship, there tends to be one person that is more masculine and the other person is more feminine. And that difference between the two creates that attraction. Remember, attraction grows in the spaces in between. So, say, for example, someone like me who's a masculine male, I'm very attracted to feminine traits in a woman. I find femininity very alluring, and the same goes for most women. They're attracted to the masculine traits of a man, but that doesn't mean that sometimes I'll exhibit feminine traits, and the same goes for a woman. They'll exhibit masculine traits. But if you're expressing those traits on a regular basis, that can be quite off-putting for your partner. Say if I was with a lady who became very laddish and was, showing a lot of masculine behaviours, I just wouldn't find that attractive. And over time, it would put me off the person. And I'm sure the same would go the other way around. The next thing on the list is childish behaviour. In stressful situations, people tend to adopt their childhood ego state. Say, for example, when you're arguing, people might be overly defensive, overreact, or they might sulk. But as a mature adult, you've got to be able to look in on yourself and say, well, hang on a minute here. I'm acting like a kid. I've got to stop this. I can't go sulking. I've got to resolve this conflict. Because if two people are coming at it from a childhood ego state, then it's very hard to resolve the conflict, and it just doesn't dissipate in the length of time it needs to for you to come out the other side of it. If you both go off sulking in your bedrooms as adults, then who's going to step forward and come together? You need at least one person adopting that adult ego state and just be able to say, okay, I was a bit out of order there. Let's see how we can reach some level of agreement on this. So if someone is exhibiting childish behaviours all the time, like say, for example, one person's quite mature when it comes to arguments and they're able to maintain their cool, they're able to talk about it in a mature adult way, but the other person just keeps overreacting, getting shouty, throwing the toys out the pram, storming off, sulking for days, silent treatment, all that sort of stuff, then there's a severe discrepancy between the two people, and the adult will most likely get fed up of the child in the relationship and eventually have enough and walk away. Next thing on the list is life events. So things like stress, grief, work, or just personal issues. These are emotion blockers. I've experienced this myself. If you're stressed, sometimes it can block empathy. And, I didn't even realize that was a thing until it happened to me. But when you've got so much going on, you're basically just in survival mode, and you almost don't have the emotional capacity to handle other things outside of that. And that can create an emotional distance between you and your partner. Grief is a strange one because, you can often feel numb. You also go through all the other emotions like anger and denial and depression. And that can put a real wedge in between you and your partner. It's such a shame because it's not their fault. But if the person isn't able to understand what you're going through or empathize with it, then it just creates further distance between the two of you. So life events is a big one, and it's quite a sad one to think about because a lot of them are things that are happening outside of the relationship, but they're having an impact internally on the relationship and forcing two people apart. I think if your work's starting to get in the way of the relationship, then you have to ask yourself, what do you value more, your work or your relationship? Because something's got to give somewhere along the lines. Different growth paths. If one person is constantly trying to work on themselves, trying to optimize their health and their well-being, learn new skills, and wants to see the world, for example, but the other person is quite content with just staying at home and not really changing, not evolving, then obviously you're going to grow in different directions, and people just do grow apart. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just unfortunate, but it makes sense that, if one person has this zest for life and this desire to do more and the other person just doesn't, then there's a big void between the two of you. And when the void gets too big, it breaks down that emotional attraction, and that can be the end of the relationship. The next one on the list is something that I reckon a lot of people can relate to, certainly people who've been through a divorce, because you can see the ugly side of people when finances get involved, and that is financial differences. If one person's extremely generous and the other one's extremely greedy, then they're both opposite ends of the spectrum. The greedy person might take advantage of the generous person, and the generous person might be repulsed by the other one's greed. I personally think that greed is one of the most unattractive traits in a human being. I find it disgusting. You can't take money with you. If you've got the money, then you need to, try and spend it and help those around you wherever you can. So I would find that incredibly off-putting. But then if there is a greedy person who sees money as something that is extremely important to them, and they're with someone who's quite frivolous with it and is spending their money all the time, that might put them off. So it does work both ways, but financial differences can be a huge problem in relationships and often a reason that many relationships break down. The last two on the list are things that I touched upon in my other video, which I strongly advise you watch after this, which are the 3 things you need for a successful relationship. And they are poor communication and a breakdown of trust. They both connect together quite heavily because you build trust with that healthy communication. That's a good place to end it there. Now, I'm going to go into the ick. I promise you I would. This is a little bonus section for those of you who've been hanging on just for this moment. So what is the ick? This is my definition of the ick. It's a conscious cherry on top of a multi-layered cake that's been baking in your subconscious for a while. What do I mean by that? So you've got different things that have gone on in this relationship, different things that that person might have done. Many of the things that I've covered in the list in today's video might fit into this cake. And if these happen over a period of time, they're building up inside you, and eventually one day they do that one thing that becomes the cherry that goes on top of the cake. The cake's baked, it's ready to take out the oven, you are done, you are out of that relationship, there's no going back, you're physically and emotionally checked out of it. And I'm going to give you a little story here. I remember getting the ick, and it's the one that stays in my memory because it's quite funny. And if you were to listen to this in isolation, you'd be like, flipping heck, he's very particular, as if he'd end a relationship based on that. But obviously, there was lots of other stuff that wasn't right. It wasn't a long relationship, but this was the moment where I was like, nah, I'm out. So it was a Monday morning. The alarm was going to go off at 6:30 to go to work. And the person I was with at the time must have woken up at about 6 o'clock. And they didn't know that I was just stirring. They didn't know that I was awake. But they rolled over and said, oh, 6 o'clock, only half an hour before we have to get up for work. And I was just lying there thinking, it's Monday morning. I don't need someone to reinforce that fact. I don't need someone to assume that I'm awake and start speaking to me at 6 a.m. only to remind me I've only got half an hour left in bed before the alarm goes off. It just was a really negative start to the week. And obviously, like I just said, it wasn't just this one thing, but that was the final straw for me. And that was where I just thought, nah, this isn't going to work. Me and this person isn't going to work. So that little comment was the cherry on top of a cake that had been baking in my oven for a while. Look, I hope some of the things in this video have been helpful to you. Like I say, often it's very easy to look back on a relationship in hindsight. And I reckon if you went back through all your relationships, you'd find out that, well, they all broke down as a result of a drop in physical or emotional attraction. But it's how you got to that point that is worth trying to reveal, because they are the lessons you can carry forward to minimize the chance of this happening in the future. Please click that like and subscribe button. And if you haven't already, watch my other video on the 3 things you need for a successful relationship. I really hope you're okay. And I really hope whatever you're going through right now, these videos are helping you. You've got this and I've got you. Thanks for watching.